There are support groups throughout the St. Louis area. STLEFA, that's St. Louis Effort for AIDS, has support groups in the St. Louis city. I don't know about the county, but I do know that in Clayton, there's also a support group that my agency runs. We're called Empowered, a Center for Sexuality, and we have flyers for our support group there on the table next to Kendra and David. When I first was diagnosed, I went to support groups at EFA. And I found, I was really kind of nervous. I was like, this is going to be weird. I'm meeting a bunch of strangers. We're going to be talking about something that I'm very uncomfortable with, and I have no idea what this is going to be like. And my only experience of a support group was watching Rent, and they just all held hands and cried and sang the most sad song I've ever heard. And I was like, oh my God, is this what I'm walking into? It's not like that. I went in and I was like, oh, there's chili. And there's soft drinks, and people are being social, and this is just a fun kind of place to be there for each other. And I had a really good time, and I got to know people, and I got to see that in a lot of ways, where at the time I did feel like a victim, in a lot of ways I saw that I still had certain privileges, and I saw the things in my life that I should be grateful for. And I saw in these other individuals their privileges and the things that they found pride in, and it inspired me. And I got to know some of them, and it was a very good community feeling that helped me feel better and more like a person again, and that helped me to tell other people. So you can do that too. That's always an option. And support groups are not just for people who are recently diagnosed. Support groups you can attend at any point and any time, and they're usually free for HIV. I've never found a support group that charged money for people to go. So please, if you do know somebody who has HIV, or if you have HIV and you ever feel like you need it, know that there are support groups out there. Additionally, stapled to my support group flyer is a list of resources throughout the St. Louis area, which includes St. Louis Effort for AIDS and their support group. So, there we are. Sorry about that. I want to talk real quick about population. In St. Louis, if you're feeling like you're in the minority because you have HIV, it's true, you're in the minority, but not as much as you may think. There's a lot of HIV in St. Louis. A lot of people with it. I know that when I was diagnosed and I was feeling terrible about it, my doctor, he's been an HIV specialist for 32 years, he was actually in San Francisco during the AIDS crisis. A very prominent doctor in this field. I don't want to throw his name out during my presentation in case he doesn't want to be affiliated, but the first thing that he told me when I let him know that I felt like I was never going to have options again. I felt like I was never going to be attractive. I was never going to find another date. And he said, 1 in 4. And I was like, what? And he said, 1 in 4. In our gay population in St. Louis, it's 1 in 4 has HIV. And I said, what? No, that's just ridiculously high. And he said, St. Louis it's notoriously one of the highest in STI rates across the board. It doesn't matter your sexuality. We have very high rates of STIs. We're number 1 in chlamydia right now. I checked right before I came on today, just so y'all know. In our straight population in St. Louis, we have the highest chlamydia rate right now. In our gay population in St. Louis, we have the 2nd highest HIV rate. So these are things to pay attention to. Does that mean that we should all be scared right now? No, it doesn't mean we should all be scared. I'm telling you this actually so that we can understand that this is a very mixed community and that we should all feel good. What we should also do, though, is be wise with information like we're number 1 in chlamydia, and remember that next time we go out to have a sexual encounter and maybe consider what we can do to be safer with our sex. Let's talk about cultural attitudes. We already know that it used to be called GRID, now it's called AIDS. It's not a gay disease. I just really want to drive that home, especially with our local, our United States political climate right now. there is definitely no affiliation with HIV and a particular sexuality other than circumstance. The reason that HIV spread like wildfire through the gay populations was because gay people, I'm going to set this down because I'm passionate about this. Sorry, I have to talk with my hands, I'm Italian. So gay people were essentially herded. This happened through just decades of being stigmatized and treated like crap. Gay people left rural areas. They weren't allowed there. They weren't welcome there. They all went into cities. Well, they went into cities. They formed gayborhoods, areas that were just tons and tons of gay people in a very small space. And oftentimes, from a psychosocial perspective, let's consider that when you have been ostracized by family, friends, society, you are more likely to engage in more attention-seeking and more gratifying from other people types of behaviors, including sexual ones. So it is very likely that an individual who has had a past of being ostracized sexually will have a more sexual openness once they do come to a realization about themselves and feel empowered. So then we have these people who have been herded, they've been basically cattled into these little areas, and now they have sexual awakenings, and then HIV gets thrown into the mix. But it was not because they were gay, it was because society was homophobic, and that's what happened. So I'm just throwing that out there. I got a little passionate on that one. I'm sorry, I'm gonna grab my paper. Okay, so some people do think of HIV as a punishment for bad behavior. A lot of people say, oh, you know, you were out there, you were being a slut. This is a big, big issue for gay people because they are very slutty. They have, whether or not it's because they had bad past, they're sluts. So everybody says that that this is the result of bad behavior. It's not the result of bad behavior. Is it the result of behavior? Well, technically anything in our lives, again, I'm a behavior analyst, anything in our lives that we do that a dead man can't do, that's the result of behavior. It's the result of whatever behavior you've had before it. And whatever you're doing right now that a dead man can't do, that's behavior. You're thinking, that's behavior. You're looking at me, that's behavior. So anything you do is the consequence for behavior. No matter what we do in our lives, no matter how bad we are, we as a society have come to terms with the notion we are smarter than and better than the notion that we should slowly and torturously kill somebody for their behavior, right? That's something that we don't do. We're not like, hey, you know what? You just did something awful. You get the death punishment or death penalty, so we're going to draw it out over 7 months. And we're just going to make this the most miserable crap ever. We don't do that because we as human beings are better than that. Yet some people think that this is a punishment brought onto us by some all-knowing deity. I don't know what your religious affiliations are, but if you believe that your God is smarter than we are, then this cannot be a punishment. Or this God is not smarter than we are, one of the two. So, just kind of throwing that one out there too. This cannot be a punishment for bad behavior because it would be simply inhumane. It's also an unhealthy line of thought. If you have been diagnosed and you're sitting around and you feel like you're being punished because of your own behavior, that's very, that is just an awful feeling. That's not something that we want. That's not going to help you get better. That's not positive. That's not a plan towards the future. That's looking on the past and saying, God, I wish I'd done things different, which I can never do. That's not doing anything for you. It's also not always contracted through behavior. Not contracted through our own behavior, I should say. So there are people who have gotten it from blood transfusions. There are people, first responders, who've gotten it even though they were wearing gloves and doing everything right, but the person that they were helping grabbed them for more help and got blood all over them. These things happen, and people do end up with HIV who did not engage in any sexual behavior to get it. So to sit there and think that it is a punishment for bad sexual behavior goes against simple observational fact on top of that. It can also happen to people who have gotten it from their parents, right? People who are born with HIV. Again, if we're looking at this as a punishment, what did that baby do? That baby must have been awful in the womb. I mean, like the worst baby ever to deserve this. And if that baby lives because it deserved to die, it's going to live a really annoying, awful life where it's going to have to take a lot of pills and it's going to, potentially die at a young age because its liver's messed up. But it's a punishment. It's a punishment. No, it cannot be a punishment. So, since we know that it's not a punishment, since we know it can happen through genetics, we know it can happen to first responders, we know it can happen to people who are not contracting it even sexually, people are learning. They're learning to become more educated. We see less fear now than we saw before. It's much more common now for doctors and dentists and people who may come into contact with blood to be okay with taking on a patient who has HIV. If you have HIV, I definitely recommend you tell your doctor or dentist if it's a new doctor or dentist. I also I recommend that you check your doctor or dentist's comfort level with that. If your doctor is really uncomfortable treating you, get a different doctor. Doctors don't have a corner on the market. This is America. There's quite a few of them around. Get a doctor who does care and can help.